Hello, I'm June Reith.
And I'm Kyle Thompson.
And you're listening to General Intellect Unit, and this time we are talking about The Peripheral, a novel by William Gibson that was published in 2014. Yeah, fun bit of late Gibson here, which I haven't read all of his previous works, but I was fond of the Bridge trilogy, like the, what the fuck were they called? Like Virtual Light and those other two. They were good fun. This one's, I think I like this book a lot. I liked it when it came out, and I've liked it on reread. It didn't, on my first reading, it didn't entirely sink in just how grim this thing is.
Yes, yeah, perhaps. I can understand that. If you were just reading it casually as opposed to with like a mind to discussing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely right. Because, and like, I think in the vein of like the best cyberpunk, the most interesting thing about it is the setup and the setting, and the kind of concepts that it introduces. The plot is fine, the characters are fine, but the setting really tickles me in a big way.
I guess it's not a unique premise, but it is a very interestingly realized one.
Mm-hmm. Because the trick here is that it's split across two timelines, and the chapters like just alternate very quickly. Like each chapter is like 2 pages each, maybe 3.
Yeah, it's like sort of like it's like Dan Brown style pacing of like each chapter is like 2 pages or maybe 10, something like that. Very, very short chapters.
Real bite-sized stuff. And they alternate between the two timelines. Our two lead characters are Flynn in, well, what I'll call the past, and Wilf Netherton in what I'll call the future. Both of these are actually in our future. Flynn lives somewhere around the 2050s, I think. 2040s, 2050s. In the middle of nowhere in America.
Somewhere in the South. Somewhere in the South. Like maybe Appalachia-ish area, thereabouts. Yeah.
It has those vibes, yeah. I'm sure you could actually triangulate it based on some of the places that are mentioned, but we're not going to do that right now. And then Wilf Netherton lives about 70 years later, early 2120s maybe, something like that. In London, and these two time periods are separated by a 40-year slow motion apocalypse that in the future is referred to as the jackpot, which is not a single, like, so what Gibson's doing here is that like we throughout much of fiction we kind of imagine Armageddon as a single event, or it's something that's spatially located. But no, this is just a really bad time that stretches on for 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, it's kind of like the mass like civilization collapse event at the end of like, what is it, the 1100s, mid 1100s, something like that. The
Bronze Age collapse or something,
Yes, yeah, and I like what he does here because it's not like, climate change is the apocalypse. It's climate change, but then all of the non-linear feedback effects that go along with it and the fucked up society that existed prior to climate change. It's called the jackpot because it's just like, sort of everything came up in exactly the right way to just cause the worst possible outcome.
Yeah, it's the dark jackpot. it's the bad payout.
yeah. I mean, it's dark humor, right? To call it the jackpot. It's also got stuff like, pandemics and, basically we are living in the jackpot as far as I can tell right now. So he got his timeline roughly correct.
Yeah. I think Netherton even tells Flynn that she's living in the early stages of the jackpot and that she doesn't quite realize it.
Yeah, it's already started or it's about to start, and it's not exactly clear. Like Lobier, the Spy Master character seems to have a clearer sense of, what exactly initiates the jackpot than he does. But it's like, in her very, very near future, like a few months maybe, is kind of the situation.
Yeah, and the two timelines are entangled by a weird thing that exists in the future. There's like a server you can connect to that then makes an informational connection to what they call stubs, which are like begin as the past of that world, but then the fact that you've connected to it makes it split off into a different kind of timeline.
Yeah, it's essentially like playing Victoria 3 or something, like a Paradox game. Like the initial starting conditions are identical to what existed historically, but then it diverges, through the interaction with the observer or the agent that started it up. And it's just like one of those historical simulations, but realized to the maximum degree of verisimilitude, where it's kind of impossible to distinguish the simulacrum from the real thing, except if you are outside the stub and can say, oh yeah, that's a thing that exists on a server in China, as opposed to that is a real place.
Which I think is very kind of it's a very interesting theme in this book, right? That like because like in classic cyberpunk, you do this like telepresence stuff to project your mind into a virtual world, and that's where all the crazy possibilities exist, right? But in this one, like telepresence and pervasive telecommunications are very much a thing, but the kind of edgy cyberpunk like hacker stuff is less emphasized, and the telepresence like takes you to other locations in reality, not to like they don't spend any time in virtual worlds here, really.
No, the people in the past are like, the Flynn Fisher, the main character, is basically like an elite gamer girl. She's like kind of esports pro sort of in her spare time, and it does begin by playing some like video games online in virtual spaces, but then of course after she's engaged in the present, that all goes by the wayside, and we don't see any more of that.
And like the titular Peripheral is this like replicant in the future, like this brainless sort of quasi-human thing that you can telepresence into, like a remote piloting sort of thing. Flynn is invited to visit the future this way, that like, she puts on her gamer headset and like the fucking VR goggles, but like, that's the interesting thing, is it's not projecting into a virtual space, it's projecting into a real space in the future. And symmetrically...
Yes, it's a virtual agent projecting into a real space.
Right, but symmetrically from the future, they treat this stub thing as, what do they call them? Like continua enthusiasts. That's these hobbyists who basically use the stubs and the continua as entertainment, right? Like it's basically, it's almost a video game to a lot of them, where they're doing telepresence back into the past or versions of the past. I don't know. I find that to be a fun inversion, that like they're not fucking around in virtual worlds here. It's all far too real.
Yes, yeah. There's the virtuality is something that sort of exists at fringes of your awareness in the story. As opposed to something that's shoved in your face, like, oh, look at how synthetic and artificial this is, like Lawnmower Man or whatever. Like, it is not that. It is a world that is, to the people in it, very real, and to the people interacting with it, over time it becomes very real to them as well, despite being a digital simulacrum.
And I love the contours of the story as well, around how these people get involved with each other across these times, right? That like basically like Netherton like gives like a gift to somebody he's interested in, right? And the gift is I've hired through this stub thing, I've hired somebody to fly a security drone for you around your house, and then actually the recipient, Deidre West, just goes, fuck this, and passes it on to her sister, Alita West. But that's a very dark and weird concept of like, I've paid somebody in the past, or a version of the past, to do what they think is beta testing a video game by flying a drone around your house every night to, like, you know, do security or whatever.
Yeah, so to keep the paparazzi away is the mission.
And one of these nights, Burton, like Flynn's brother, is what's he doing? He's like going. He goes to like counter protest some religious fundamentalists. He gets arrested by Homeland Security, and Flynn has to do the assignment for him, or else they lose out on the money.
Yeah, it was originally going to be her brother who is running the job, but then she ends up doing the job as a favor to him because he's going to go fuck with some Westboro Baptist Church people.
Flynn immediately notices that, like, this looks a lot like London, except none of the lights are turned on, and there's like 3 cars in the streets that she can see. And she thinks, oh, they haven't figured out the textures yet because it's a beta, and they haven't figured out the driving AI. And so she just kind of brushes it off. Does this little security run around an apartment, sees 2 people on a balcony or whatever. And then the next day does the same sort of thing, but then the woman on the balcony gets eaten by a swarm of nanobots and killed.
Yeah, just absolutely, like, disintegrated. It's like one of those, like, disintegrator rays from Star Trek that, like, the Romulans use or whatever. Yeah,
but the description of this is horrible as well, where it's like a plastic bag that crawls the side of the building and then unleashes this swarm of fucking nanoflies or whatever. Flynn comes away with the impression this doesn't seem like a game, does it? Right? And she's just witnessed a murder in the future.
Yeah, it's so, like, gruesome that it's kind of like, why would anyone pay to play this? This is really fucked up and sick.
Yeah. And like she's been playing, like she'll do flashbacks to being, you know, in the esports whatever thing of or she's being paid by somebody to, like, you know, be her lieutenant in a game or whatever that's like a World War II reenactment or some shit, and you know that stuff is plenty gruesome, but this strikes her as incredibly weird and fucked up, which it is because it's not a game. So that's how this kind of entanglement starts, with Netherton then kind of like has to... the whole start of...
Netherton is the person in the present who gifted Flynn and her brother's services. That's who that is. In
Netherton's timeline, then it's kind of all about like getting together for this kind of like, well, okay, Alita West is missing. You might have access to the only person who might have seen anything that might have happened to her. Inspector Lobier, of what seems to be the Metropolitan Police, but something much worse and more powerful than that in future London, gets involved.
Yeah, it's like Metropolitan Police / MI5 / MI6 / private Pinkerton security / whatever oppressive structure you want to throw in there.
She gets involved, and like this book is quite slow. Like this plays out; these 2 interleaving stories play out over like a good couple of chapters. Like you're getting to the quarter mark of the book by the time you're actually getting this stuff to come together, right?
Yeah, it's very fast and disorienting at the start of the book, in a really Gibson way. Like there's a very sort of common writing technique he uses of thrusting you into a world and overwhelming you with so many details without the relevant context that you're just scrambling to try to understand what's going on.
But I do love the little details though, because it's full of these little evocative phrases. Like, you know, Flynn makes reference to a legally purchased cigarette, which just, tell me more of the story behind that, you know? Or like, how did Homeland Security come to be the replacement for the police force, you know? Tell me the story behind that. But all of this shit is just, it's a barrage of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get the sense that, like, the only functional thing about the American government that's left is the security apparatus, and like it's kind of like you have the military abroad and then Homeland Security at home, and this like oppressive regulationary monolith is really it's really all that's left of America, and everything else is just completely hollowed out. So it's pretty close to reality. Just like 1 inch further in that direction, you know?
Right, exactly. It's only a couple of decades into the future, right? But like, I mean, Flynn's mom is like, hey, remember when there was a hospital on fucking Willow Road or whatever, you know?
Yeah, like when there used to be some kind of social services or like civilian administration that wasn't just purely about maintaining order.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of the fun symmetries of the book, is that like Flynn lives in this like desolate hinterland, whereas Netherton lives in the metropole, right? But like neither of them, like the metropole isn't really a metropole. It's this weird, but they are mirrored.
It's like it's a simulacrum of a metropole. It's large. It's built environment, but nobody there is doing the kinds of jobs you would expect in a metropole. There's only really a ruling class and some hangers-on, and there are a lot of sort of theme park like almost like either installation art or like altered reality theme park areas that are used to refer back to British history, so as to like give the people there some sense of rootedness in time and space, which they would not otherwise have, because the jackpot was so disorienting and traumatic that like the continuity of the past is something you can only sort of will into existence through creating these art pieces.
Right, sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think for the listeners, it's also kind of important that like the future society after the jackpot is very technically advanced. Like one of the things that gets them through it is the invention of like nanobots that are initially tasked with cleaning up all the corpses, because a colossal majority of humanity dies, and actually a colossal majority of all biomass on the earth dies. You kind of get the impression there might only be 2 million people left in the world, you know?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, it's like very, very low population numbers remaining.
It's a kind of dark. It's like a dark Star Trek in a way that like it has that post scarcity like technical foundation, but it doesn't have any of the communism. It's a kind of ossified, kind of post capitalist world that is actually more feudal in its structure.
It's feudal, but without the extractive apparatus of feudalism, right? It's just it's just the lords and ladies squabbling with each other and nothing else.
because like all the service work is done by either by AI controlled robots or whatever, and it seems you can just conjure anything into existence with a replicator. So like power in that world is not. It does seem to be post-capitalist in that it doesn't have like extraction of surplus value through labor, or control of labor or command of labor, and like it doesn't have that like accumulation loop of gaining more command of labor to get more surplus value. Instead, power seems to be corresponding to direct deployment of technological force. You know, that it's a matter of who has the biggest and best computers and the biggest and best nanobot swarms.
And the best assassins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. It's a very brutal future.
Yeah, it's very like Dune, but not in space and more so.
And I think is it Lobier or Ash who kind of makes the direct comparison to like feudal kind of power relations that like
I think it's I can't remember. It could be either of them, honestly. I don't quite recall. But yeah, the people who do exist in the future, such as Inspector Lobier or Wilf Netherton or Ash, who is the brother of one of Netherton's friends, who is like a sort of a princeling who has inherited part of like a Russian mafia fortune.
So, so that it's Lev Zubov, who is like a Russian oligarch fail son or something, and I think Ash is his like techno wizard lady person.
Oh, sorry, I thought they were related for some reason.
I thought they were employee. I don't know, maybe. But so you've got Ash and Oshin, who Oshin is the kind of security or like butler kind of guy, and Ash is the technical person. And they're under Lev, his umbrella. And so like his kind of house in Notting Hill is the kind of base of operations for some of this stuff, because Lev is the continuum enthusiast through which Netherton bought Burton's services. And so they're all kind of mutually involved in this thing when it kind of becomes obvious that like, hey shit, Elita West is missing. Fuck. I wonder if your drone guy might have seen anything. And then, you know, they try to, you know, they're trying to like get into, it's kind of funny, right? There's a really funny couple of chapters where they're trying to like get back in touch with Burton to try and establish what happened, but they also have to like, they then remember, oh shit, we have to pretend that we're people in the past. So they like drag out an old computer monitor and they get like an old webcam to make the call. But the thing is, they overshoot by like a decade, because when Flynn...
Yes, yeah.
When Flynn sees it, she's like, that's a really old computer you're using, you know, like on the screen or whatever.
Yeah, even for their time, it's like very outdated. It's like if you had one of those like 4x3 15 hertz flat panels that have like, you know, super washed out colors, and like, you know, you only see them in offices these days. Yeah, it's very funny.
It's so funny. It's so funny that they don't know how to talk to people in the past convincingly, and how to keep up the illusion that they're not from the future. Because they're going through like a shell operation. So from Flynn's perspective, or from Burton's perspective, they're being hired by Milagros Cold Iron, based out of Panama or something.
Colombia.
And right, that's it. And so they kind of think that they're talking to the Colombians, but then why are these Colombians English is one of the first thing that comes to their mind. And like, because their office is in the future, their office is in like the back of what is it, a Mercedes land yacht is how it's described, like this gargantuan RV, like high tech thing.
Yeah, well, because like Lev, the sort of the fail son, this princeling, the continua enthusiast. It's like, what is it? His dad was. Yeah, his dad was like this like gray eminence, like, you know, serious business, major power broker sort of guy. And like, he has this land yacht for driving around. Like, he kind of just like had it commissioned as like a fun thing to do, of like, I'm going to go drive around the desert. It's kind of like running the Dakar rally these days for rich people, but like,
right.
Instead, it's like, what if there weren't enough people to actually hold a rally, and you just went by yourself with a couple friends in your big land yacht and drove around the desert? And so like they're sort of all living in the like almost like this museum of stuff that Lev's dad has. That's like he was big and important and actually did things, and Lev is just like, you know, kind of like existing in that space.
Yeah, even he's living in the hollowed out ruins of the past, you know.
Yeah.
It's just it's a very funny setting, and like there's something I love about it, that like Netherton is clearly an alcoholic in this, but like there's you know, the little bar that's in the mini bar that's in the fucking land yacht. It's like everyone else can open it with their thumbprint, but he can't. Like, he's being constantly blueballed when he's trying to get a gin and tonic. It's very funny. Yeah,
because like everybody around him has to basically keep him on a leash so that he can do his job. Because, you know, he is such a compulsive alcoholic that he will just cause all kinds of problems if he's not like restrained from drinking in any situation. Yeah, and his alcoholism is like, you know, a result of being alienated from his present as this like really fucked up world, horrified by the jackpot, and also not being interested in these like neo-primitivist people who are like also trying to create simulacra of the past by like they're trying to create some kind of outside to the society they live in by pretending that they're quote unquote primitives, and sort of like, you know, ad hoc throwing together anthropological resources to create a sense of being something other than this suffocating society they live in. But Wilf Netherton despises them as well because what they're doing is not authentic, and he wants authenticity, which is why he gets very interested in the stub, right? Is because this is the kind of authentic past that he can become emotionally invested in outside of his alcoholism, because it's convincing. It's a very realistic simulacrum in a way that these kind of LARP events that the neo-primitives set up is not.
Yeah, certainly. And there's a bit we kind of missed at again, the interleaving weirdness of the book, but like at the start of Netherton's story, he's a PR guy or something. He's like in fucking, I don't know, some sort of publicist, that's what it is. He's kind of following along with like his client, Daedra West, is this like artist slash like diplomat slash fucking something, like some weird sort of public celebrity person, who's on her way to visit the patch, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch has congealed into an actual island now, and these neo-primitivists are there like building this alternate society or whatever.
Yeah, like they've used like nanobots to build like a sort of island out of the garbage patch, and they're living there.
I kind of love how repulsed Netherton is by this, that like because like it has that like sickening kind of sweaty grey plastic kind of thing that you get with like milk bottles and whatever. And he fucking hates it. Like, to him, it's like the fucking, you know, city of Arlia or whatever, like Cthulhu's gonna fucking come out of it or something. You know, it's this, like, diseased place.
Yes. There's something very, very Lovecraftian about the description of the neo-primitive LARPers and the in this place. Yeah,
there's actually something I love about that early scene where like it kind of starts out with Netherton again, the Gibson thing of dumping you into a really baffling situation. Like, Netherton is on the phone to this lady called Rainey, who then forwards him to like a video feed from like the deck of this hovercraft or whatever that's approaching the island, and then I think he gets forwarded a couple of times. Like, it's doing this like pervasive telepresence, pervasive like embedded in your skull like networking, and like the phone is in your skull, that kind of shit, and it's super disorienting, but basically like this interaction where, you know, Daedra fucking parachutes down into the patch city or whatever goes badly wrong when she ends up like killing their leader, and even that's fascinating because like I don't know. From Netherton's perspective, it looks like she gets too close to him, which triggers her personal security system, which automatically kills him. And then, from out of nowhere, these like drones descend from the sky and just start shredding everyone. And that's kind of where he backs out of the call, I guess, like disconnects. But it's again super disorienting. You know, it's
yes, it's sort of like her like subversive art piece was to like murder everybody there. Yeah, because like she's very like into like super edgy art of like she like has like her entire skin peeled off and turned into an art piece, and then she gets like a new skin after that or something. That's like her thing.
Right, and gets it tattooed, you know, and like everybody pays for like Funko Pop like replicas of this stuff, you know. Um, Pretty weird stuff, and it's kind of left a bit ambiguous as to whether that was an accident or a kind of deliberate part of the interaction. And spoiler, turns out to be deliberate, you know. But that's, yeah, I don't know. Like Netherson's thing, like the variety of responses to the jackpot are interesting because you get Lev Zubov, who seems to be totally ambivalent to it, except for like being interested in pre-jackpot stubs or whatever. You get
It's like he's like a sort of historical miniatures hobbyist is kind of like his like curiosity based interaction in with the past.
Yeah. But other than that, he reminds me of like in Children of Men, you have the guy who lives in the power station, the Battersea power station, with the Pink Floyd pig outside, and you know when asked about the catastrophe that's unfolding around them, he just says, "I try not to think about it." You know that reminds me a lot of Lev. You've got Netherton who hates the world he lives in and also hates the fucking Patchers, like the primitivists and stuff. You've got Ash who makes a point of like wearing black all the time, really goth sort of attire, and like her skin is covered in like living tattoos of extinct animals like giraffes and stuff like that just walk around on her skin, so she's in public sort of display of mourning, but she can't do much of anything about it. But then Lobeer is somebody who actually lived through the jackpot. Lobeer, she's 120 years old or something at this point, but doesn't look it, you know. And she has the power and the resources and the will to actually interfere with a version of the past to try and steer it away from the jackpot. So you get a nice spectrum.
Yeah, she has like a sort of personal investment in altering the direction of the stub of the past, the simulated past, because she actually lived through it and has like, you know, a sort of personal investment in her own failings during those events, and trying to make things right. Like she, at the beginning of the book, she actually has like her memories like suppressed, of the jackpot because it's like too traumatic for her to live with on a long-term basis. And then like for the purposes of doing this operation of trying to change things back then, in the stub, she re-accesses or re-enables those memories, and sort of reconnects with that past.
Right, because she can... Well, in general, everyone in the future who connects to the stub can manipulate the past in a pretty incredible way because they have information, not necessarily about precisely how things are going in the stub right now, but it's enough information and enough computing power in the future to be able to outmaneuver most things in the past.
Yeah, it's a combination of like, you know, technological capacities and then also just foreknowledge of what's going to come. Yeah.
So for Lobeer, I mean, like everybody knows that in the past, like very slightly after Flynn's time, the president of the United States will be assassinated, and that's one of the big things that precipitates the worst parts of the jackpot. But Lobeer also happens to know precisely how to avert that. Because she was a CIA agent back then at the time, actually, you know, or, you know, she was MI5 at the time, and, you know, in retrospect, maybe could have intervened.
I think she was I think she was actually working for the Americans, but she was like an expat from the UK. I think that was kind of her thing. And then, you know, because she was, like essentially at that time she didn't have the full story of what was going on, and she was obviously like institutionally constrained in what she could do, but you know, having that knowledge that old Lobeer has, about, you know, like in her subsequent investigations figuring out what exactly went on, she can do something different, right? She has enough information to be able to make some different calls. And then also, of course, has access to all of the resources that come with Cold Iron and Flynn's people.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's why she's getting involved here. Is that, well, the reason is that, like, I mean, she's an officer of the Metropolitan Police or something, and is very interested in the fact that Alita West seems to have been murdered.
Just wants to know who was the murderer, and then, like, we need the witness to ID the perp, right? That's her basic objective.
And that's the kind of the two overlapping stories for the middle of the book, is that in the past, Flynn and Burton and all their buddies are experiencing this kind of ratcheting, worsening security situation, as there's assassins being sent after them that are, being directed by equivalents to the Cold Iron people. Like, the Cold Iron people know that somebody else is in the stub as well, trying to get to them. So there's this kind of war between Cold Iron and what they call Matryoshka, the other party, to gain kind of like economic, technological information supremacy in the past. to like ever. So, like, over the course of the novel, Cold Iron ends up like establishing a base of operations in the United States and buying out the equivalent of Walmart and buying most of the country and dominating the world economy, all in the space of a couple of days. In a few days, this all happens, right? And they eventually get the upper hand over Matryoshka, but there's assassination attempts. There's, like, the people have to, like, build a fort and all that kind of shit to try to protect themselves.
Yeah, they essentially have, like, the computing capacity to use algorithmic trading to corner the entire world market. And that's how they actually are able to accumulate wealth within the stub. Like, because you can't directly transfer money from the future to the past, but you can use your information processing capacity to capture money. And that's how that whole thing plays out.
They like, Cold Iron has a fleet of, like, students at the London School of Economics working on this to, like, get them, and Matryoshka has marginally better interns for a little while, and then they get outmaneuvered. It's just that's the kind of tension there. And then in the future, yeah, it's like they're trying to keep Flynn alive in the past so that she can be brought to the future via telepresence in this peripheral thing, where she puts on her gamer goggles and wakes up in what feels like a functional human body in the future. They need to, because, like, what's going to happen is Daedra West will hold a party, a kind of like funeral for her sister, and this Lobier's deep suspicion is that whoever killed her, like the other person that was present on the balcony, will be there, and so they need somebody with eyes there to actually do the positive ID. There's a kind of, like, the only way they can make this work in the plot is if, like, because, like, London in the future is this pervasive surveillance state, like, because everything is slick with nanobots as well, because, like, one of the things she notices is that, like, London is absolutely fucking spotless, because the nanobots that were tasked with cleaning up all the corpses after the jackpot are now tasked with just keeping everything completely pristine. But, like, the whole infrastructure of the city is pervasively tied through with surveillance and all kinds of information, the usual IT stuff, right? Except for in special places like, Zubov's family's house, which is, like, it's a black zone for this kind of surveillance, and Alita West's tower happens to be one of these black zones, so it's an exception to the usual general rule of surveillance, because, like, Lobier basically knows everything about everything in London, except for this one fact, which is very relevant to her interests.
She has like suspicions about who was the killer, but she doesn't have evidence, which matters to her as a cop.
And so there's a lot of the actual plot of the book is fairly light, but, like, it's just, like, there's a lot of window dressing of, like, the characters milling around and doing things, and, like, they do a test run where they bring Flynn to the future via the peripheral and all that kind of stuff, and she has to go back every couple of hours for a toilet break, that kind of thing. It's a very lived in sort of thing, right? Especially with the alternating perspectives, you get, like, you get two different characters' perspectives on each scene, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like kind of reminds me of, like, 24, like that sort of, like, conceit of like, real time. Like, there are time skips in the book, but it's very, like, continuous, the story. Like in a short period of time, all this stuff goes down.
Because like everything that happens in the book is supposed to happen in about 5 or 6 days, maybe, like at most, which is quite good. So I mean that's a lot of the sort of middle part, and like I don't know, a lot of it is setting up conversations. Like it feels like it takes 20 or 30 pages for them to like set up a conversation between Flynn and Lowbeer, and get some stuff like that. But it is quite fascinating stuff. At some point, Flynn is kidnapped, and then they kill the kidnappers, that kind of stuff.
The local drug kingpin in her town is purchased by Matryoshka, and kidnaps her, and then her brother and his buddies, who are all ex-military, like special ops guys, they go and save her with the help of the Cold Iron people, and blow the drug facility to Kingdom Come.
Accidentally, it seems. But like, what's the thing that they were haptic recon, right? And like they're
they're basically like cybernetically enhanced spec ops people. Yeah.
But now they're left with the remnants of the implants and like these kind of like scaly textures on their skin, like where the hookups and connections are, the like little circuit board things on their skin or whatever. And these glitch, right? It's the thing, like there's a lot of disabled veterans in this story, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, cyberpunk is always like very close and fascinated with disability, right? It kind of fetishizes prosthesis and sort of technological answers to disabilities as a source of like alterity, of like of the future being different than the present. So like robot limbs, like Ghost in the Shell, you have entire robot bodies, or what have you, right? It's always sort of a part of that, but this story focuses on disabled veterans to a greater degree, I suppose, than many of these stories.
It's all quite on the nose with like the character of Connor, right, who's like severely disabled in the past, but like they need to bring like Flynn needs to go to the future in a sort of convincing peripheral, and they need like what they initially think is they're going to get Burton to come along with her to act as like security, whatever. But Connor ends up doing the job, even though he's like mentally quite unstable, and they're quite worried about how he's going to perform here. But he's fucking thrilled to have like a functioning body in the future.
It's not just functioning. It's like the peripheral is specifically made to be like a dueling partner, right? Like a sparring partner. So it's super fit and like Olympian level physique kind of thing, right?
And so he's thrilled with that, which is quite sweet. What else we got from like the middle section here? I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I thought was very interesting at the moment, but I might be forgetting. Oh, there's the detail with like this is something that I'm really surprised slipped past me, and like I didn't recall. But Griff, is that his name in the past? Yeah, so like there's this really, I think Gibson does a great job of weaving this little story together where there's a scene in the future where Netherton accompanies Lowbeer to go visit a friend who runs like an antique shop. The friend's name is... oh shit, I've forgotten. But anyway, she kind of like lets slip that like she's also about 120 years old. Like she's from the same time period as Lowbeer is. Like they both went through the jackpot, and they know each other because this other person was, I think, CIA, and they knew Lowbeer as like an English spy or something. It's this jokey, friendly back and forth sort of thing of like, I know, yeah, we're old friends from the old days.
Yeah, they might have been like romantically involved back before the jackpot kind of thing.
But they know each other from the job, right? And then in Flynn's timeline, when they're setting up this like base of operations to do this stuff, Cold Iron is helicoptering in more and more like professionals to like manage the place. And so the professional security forces they end up with are seemingly borrowed CIA people. Of which one of them is this person, and like, well, obviously it's a different person now because diverging timelines. But you know, Lobier's friend, and you know, I think Flynn notes this as like, that's fucking interesting. But then she also notices this other person, Griff, who seems to be an English spy, and then she puts it together. And it's like, holy shit, that's Lobier. Like, Lobier's trans and 120 years old.
Yes.
And the reason that Griff is involved is that Lobier got in contact with her old self, and like through the stub, probably quite a while before this all started to happen. She's had contact with herself in the past, and obviously was able to convince Griff very easily that she is who she says she is.
It sort of seems to be implied in the dialogue that she convinced Griff that she was actually the same person from the future by, like, saying, like, I know you're trans and closeted, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, now, you would think that this detail of this book would have stuck with me from 5 years ago. But it didn't. This came as a fucking surprise to me this time around, because I remember in our group chat, I was like, holy shit, like I got to that part of the book and I was like, holy shit, do you think Griff might be Lobier? And then I turned a couple of pages and I was like, holy yeah. You think it would have made an impression on me, but no, apparently.
No, yeah. Wow.
It's such a fun little detail, and there's something I like about it. There's something I like quite a bit, because I was initially a little bit hurt. I couldn't quite figure out how I felt about this, because the thing is that like when a little bit later when Flynn actually just asks Lobier directly, and it's like, hey, is Griff you? And she's like, yeah, totally. And then Flynn is kind of awkward about it. She's like, do you not mind me knowing this secret? And Lobier is just like, but it's not a secret to you, is it? You know, like she's very blasé about it. And as a trans woman, that brings up some feelings of like, you know, I obviously don't like being dead named or whatever, and that sort of thing. And I couldn't help but project that onto Lobier as like, doesn't that feel like it's something kind of transgressive? And I think, now, you could just say, oh, well, Gibson's just insensitive somehow. But I don't think that's what's going on here. Because Gibson, to me, always seemed like he was fairly clued in with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's sort of there's a mention in the acknowledgements at the end of the book that maybe it seems to suggest he consulted with somebody about this quite a bit, one of his acquaintances.
From what I know of Gibson, that seems like what would happen, right? Like, he does seem to be very sensitive to this stuff. So I think insensitivity is probably ruled out. What I think makes this work is that as a trans person, if you're like dead named or whatever, or you're like shown a fucking photograph of yourself from a while ago, you're usually in a kind of, you're not in a position of power about it. It's usually something that's done to you involuntarily and stuff like that, and it's all very uncomfortable. But for Lobier, she's operating from a position of power and strength, and this is a kind of, she's doing this on her own terms. She did this. She contacted herself in the past, and she steered all this using her transness to kind of steer this position of power. She's holding all the cards. There's no reason for her to feel bad about it. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, like Flynn's discovery of the connection between Griff and Lobier is kind of a consequence of a process that Lobier herself initiated, and like already had that reckoning with her past prior to any of that happening, and is not vulnerable in any way because of it, because like this is a simulation. Like eliminating Griff in the past would have no effect on Lobier in the future. It wouldn't like eliminate her from the timeline or like in a time travel story or something. It is a separate person with the same past as her. So she's not vulnerable and basically treats it as like, well, I got this all going and you figured that out, but I chose to get this going kind of thing.
Right, she holds the cards, she's holding the steering wheel. it's very different from when, you know, like what people do either accidentally or deliberately. It's your dead name is something that's wielded against you either accidentally or deliberately. There's nothing you can wield against Lobeer here. You know, it's like, yeah, she's the one who initiated it. And so I ended up liking this quite a bit. Yeah, this is a fun little detail.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was probably like, you know, part of her thought process of like, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go talk to my past self. I've got to psych myself up for that. But also as a consequence of like activating this past self as one of my agents, it's probably going to come up at some point that somebody's going to find that connection. And I'm okay with that, right? It's not a shock to her in any way.
Which that's one of the crucial differences. Yeah, is that like, yeah, I mean, if you're like a normal trans person today, or whatever, if you get dead named, it comes as a shock and all that kind of stuff. But like to her, it's not, right? Like it's not that. Yeah, again, she's in control of the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know, really good fun. There was and like, but also like, I should have seen it coming because like even when Lobeer is introduced, she's introduced as like really tall with big shoulders and shit like that, you know. And then the thing that Flynn like notices to make the connection is that like, you know, she has big hands like Griff has or whatever. It's the most obvious clocky stuff, you know, which I think is kind of cute, you know.
Yeah. I'm sure Gibson was like, okay, so what are the tells that I could use to misread?
There's another thing I love from around this sort of time when Netherton goes back to the past, but like by it's like an iPad on a stick, you know, and like they send the blueprints to the past to like make the so what they're doing a lot of the time is transferring technology. Like the gamer headset that Flynn can actually use to connect to the Peripheral is one that they've transferred the designs from the future to the past to have them 3D printed. And it's kind of the same thing that goes on here, but they just use like an off-the-shelf Walmart iPad like on a stick thing.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like those like BB-8 toys from the new Star Wars trilogy, but with like just an iPad stuck on it with like you can see the other person's face and talk to them. But yeah,
it's described as like a small Segway with an iPad attached to it, and it's just like, but like,
yeah.
Netherton being on this little fucking goofy thing going around in the past with like, you know, and to him it looks terrible because it's like through a shitty webcam, and he's accustomed to like 16K fucking resolution, you know.
But he's like into it because that is a sign of authenticity to him, and he's looking for authenticity, and so that is like something that effectively, you know, draws him into the situation as opposed to being like a block or a barrier. It's very, very funny. It's like me with like my like CRT collecting obsession. Like it's very silly. Kind of stuff, yeah.
That's a lot of fun. It's very, yeah, it reminds me of that thing you can do where, like, just for fun, you play a video game, but you set it to, like, 600 by 400 resolution just for the laugh. And, like,
exactly, yes.
It's like, oh, yeah. It looks just like Quake did back in the day, you know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like, what else we got from around here? I think there's a lot of really fun details that paint a big picture of the kind of nightmarish future that like Netherton lives in. There's just a lot of small little details that get painted, and a lot of details of the desperation and shittiness that Flynn lives in.
Yeah, like you know, in Netherton's case, it's like there's no material want for him or anybody he knows really, but they have like a kind of spiritual affliction that is like so deep that they are just kind of like dissociated in like, I guess what I would describe as what I usually experience as like a dissociated state of being, where like they are going through the motions of living, but there is no vigor to their lives. There's no impetus for them to achieve anything or strive for anything. It's like it's very the end of history vibes there. And then in Flynn's case, they're living in desperate poverty. Like her mom needs meds, and that's why she's grinding these games. And like, her brother is disabled because the implants he got as a soldier, because like he joined the military because there's nothing else to do in this town. They like malfunction sometimes and cause him like pain and discomfort. And they're living in sort of rural poverty. Their town's very like hollowed out. It's run by, sort of your local petty drug lords, and like really the only industry is drug manufacturing in the area. So it's really very desperate situation, but they don't have that same sense of like deep malaise and ennui and dissociation. They have passions in a way that people after the jackpot do not.
They have a fairly vibrant social life and, circle of friends and that kind of thing, which is quite nice. Did we... another fun, I think, really lovely detail. It's just one of these things that suggests the whole world, which is the kind of thing I like, is that, like, the jacket with the hydrophobic coating that Flynn fucking hates because it's like what, like her uncle got it in the Korean War, not the one that Burton fought in,
Yeah.
And then they sprayed it with this hydrophobic coating that like freaks her out because like nothing is supposed to act that way, Sure.
Yeah.
And like she remembers the tapes they showed her in school about how it causes cancer or whatever, that kind of shit.
Yes, exactly.
Did we talk about like the sort of mirrored political economy of this kind of worlds? Because like there's a symmetry between like the hinterland of the past and the apparent metropole of the future, but then it's very hard to work out like what the sort of political economy of the future really is, because like it suggests this like dark Star Trek sort of thing, but for us at least as Marxists, it's very hard not to think of like where the fuck are the proles, like where's the labor that goes into this stuff. But what's on screen really suggests that that's not the case at all. There isn't a functional proletariat. Like maybe Wilf Netherton is as close to a prole as you get.
Yeah, like one of these sort of hangers-on of the court, right? Like a minor official of the court is kind of like his role, and he has a friend who works for the government, and who is like his love interest later on. But she has kind of like a similar level, like professional white collar-ish job, but there's no depiction anywhere of anybody doing any like low status jobs, whether that's menial labor or whether that's care work or service jobs. Like they're all just done by robots or provided materially by replicators, right? So it really does suggest that, like, this is initially why I thought this book was turned into a TV series by Amazon, because I was like, well, this is the future that like Bezos and his ilk dream of, right? It's very like Galt's Gulch, but without anything outside of Galt's Gulch. Like the whole world is just that. There are no more masses. There are no more proletarians. There is no more relationship between labor and capital. No more dynamic relationship that drives capitalism. It is just the elite, and nobody else is left alive.
It really seems that way, and like I tried to turn it over in my head and make it work the other way, and I think the only way you could do it is that like so you have the robots, like the porcelain faced sort of robot servants, whatever.
Yeah, these like very like orientalized Michikoid robots. They just make me think of those the robots in Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, the sort of geisha robots that like their faces explode outwards. I kind of pictured that, but with like a little bit of the like smooth eye robots from the Will Smith movie, the like I did not murder him robots.
Yeah, right. Those kind of guys. But like, so those exist in contrast to the peripherals, right? Like which are much more human and a telepresence sort of driven. And I kind of started to put together like a headcanon where the Michikoids are actually telepresence driven as well, but they're driven by proletarians who like telepresence in from the fucking hinterlands. They're like deliberately excluded from London. You know, they live in fucking slums out in the middle of nowhere. And that's how service work is done or whatever. And then the peripherals would be a deliberate innovation on that. Like, oh, but what if these things didn't look like shit, basically? But I don't think that quite works.
Yeah, but we just don't get any actual evidence that that is what's going on. It's just the robots appear to just be robots. That's all there really seems to be going on with them.
Yeah, and the reason I kind of wanted to do that in my head was that there's a kind of maybe a double symmetry, because like again, like hinterland in the past contrasted with metropole in the future, but then in Flynn's world there is a metropole like DC, New York, LA, that kind of shit, right? Where similar excesses of capitalist craziness happen there, and then it suggests a mirror in the future where the apparent singular metropole would actually have its counterpart hinterland, but again, nothing on screen actually suggests that. Like that's just something that popped into my head.
Yeah, and I think that really the parallel, the symmetry between the two is that the stub is a simulacrum of the past, and the future London is also a simulacrum of the past, but in a different way, right? It's a public representation of the past as opposed to this private world that is completely encapsulated. And, you know, it's from the future, the people in the stub can get power and technology, and the people in the future can get sort of a sense of purpose and life from this simulation of the past, which is enclosed in itself, right? It allows them to have some sort of sense of an outside to this horrible Baudrillardian nightmare world that they live in.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And even though it's still a simulacrum, it feels authentic to everyone involved.
Yeah. And for Lobie or Ash and all these folks, right? Like they're trying to do something positive with that.
And like the characters in the past never have this crisis moment of, oh my god, I'm just a computer program. Oh my god, I'm just a simulacrum. I'm not real. That is something they never go through, because I guess just the world around them is so real to them and is treated as a real thing by the people from the future that, like, it kind of doesn't matter in a practical sense, assuming the servers keep running in China. But we never get anything about the servers in China. It's just, it's that classic, like, Gibson thing of, like, you know, Asia is another planet, like, it is alien and it's not really connected to the rest of the world.
No, yeah. It's very of a piece with the sort of Orientalism of early cyberpunk. It's just...
Yeah, it's like, you know, he's one of the guys who really got it started, and hasn't really moved on from it seems.
Yeah. See, I actually got the impression that my way of thinking of the stub is that that it is in fact an entire real world. It's just that, like, I think if they disconnected the server, I think that Flynn's world would continue to exist. It's just that, like, the reason it branches off from their reality is just like that's what quantum reality does when information collides. You know, you get what I mean? Like when you toss a coin, it does the fucking two split realities thing. You know?
Yeah. Right. But then,
You'd no way to verify that, though. You know?
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's very much like if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound kind of problem, right? Like it is like, okay, so, you know, this is like a configuration of reality you can access through this specific machine, but I think it would be kind of unknowable whether outside of the observer that actually existed or not. You know, it's like it's very under-described, and probably for good reason, which is that, you know, Gibson was not interested in discussing the mechanics of how this works. But I think you're right that it is more than simply a computer program. It's like, you know, in that sort of like Stafford Beer sense of like, well, reality is like the computer program performing itself, right? Like it's a configuration of matter and energy.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a sort of ambiguity in the language used, right? Because like when they say the connection, that could mean a couple of things, right? It could be that the server in China makes a connection to the past, and like both the server and the past exist separately of each other, like they're not strictly dependent. Or you could say that you are making a connection from your laptop to the server in China, and the contents of the server are totally fictional. Or it could be both, right? Like you connect to one which connects to the other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They could become disconnected. They, you know. Yeah, it's not really clear. And I guess in that sense, it is not purely a simulacrum. The past, it is a past. And that way the authenticity it offers is, I guess, a little bit more believable for everyone involved.
Even though they're aware that even though they're aware that it's not their past anymore. Although, like, it is treated as a simulacrum.
Yeah, it's done and gone for them.
Like, it is treated as a simulacrum by the enthusiasts, right? And like Lobeer drops this detail that like she knows of another enthusiast who actually basically treats it like a video game, and his hobby is to just start wars in the past and just watch the massacres.
Yes. And like you would with that like totally accurate battle simulator on your PC, right? Like that stupid game where you just get like thousands of creatures to fight each other or whatever.
Which it kind of mirrors what the games that Flynn was playing, the kind of detailed simulation of World War II combat. You know, it's a very similar thing, except it's an actual reality they're fucking with.
Yeah, and like Lobeer. One of the weapons that she has is like kind of a trump card because it was developed by that person in one of their stubs, and therefore it's like not a part of weapons development like in the present, sort of out in the open. And so like there's this thing about colonizing the past that Gibson is interested in. And that's like a pretty good example of that. Like, it sort of exactly parallels the use of war in colonial or in colonized places to do arms development for the metropole, right?
Yeah, right. That's the one of the that's one of the gruesome fucking details of what that guy is up to, is that like it's a way of developing fucking weapons for out here. And I just like it's such a crazy fucking thought that somebody's hobby is they log on to this server and get somebody to unleash smallpox there and just watch the camera feeds, you know. That's how they make fun, you know. Fucking hell.
Yeah. But you know, that's again a characteristic of colonial violence, is that you dehumanize the colonized, right? And subject them to experimentation, violence, whatever amuses you. Yeah.
Speaking of the really dark kind of super weapon stuff that's in this, there's a subplot in the future where they're like in Lev's house. They have like a pram, like a baby's buggy that has like this autonomous weapon system that, like, if the baby is threatened, it'll like clamshell up and then unleash a swarm of nanobots to just devour whoever's around it. And so
these illegal weapons, these illegal weapons. I think it was like from Lev's baby buggy or something.
Yeah, something like that. It was just
like, because it was like
lobby.
his dad's thing that he was using against his enemies more than because Lev wasn't using this for his family because it was so illegal, right?
It was just in the lobby of one of the houses or something. I think it was it was the lobby of the dad's house or something. And like Netherton notices this thing and he's like, fucking hell. But like they have to like take it and put it inside one of these like sealed, like it's like a Rolls Royce that like can hermetically seal its interior environment, and they put a peripheral in there to like do the operation to remove these like nanobot guns. Without endangering the rest of the people around, because there's sort of this pervasive like fear in the background of like a Grey Goo scenario, like the party that they go to at the end of the book. One of the things that's going on there, one of the sort of salacious things that's going on there, is that the people, the owners, are engaging in sort of like wanton use of replicators and nanobots to just be able to like walk through walls and shit. And it's kind of implied that the reason why this is prohibited is because everybody's terrified that there's going to be like a replicators get out of control and destroy everything problem. Right, like the what do they call them? Assemblers or something? They're kept under...
Yeah, assemblers, They
have fairly strict protocol, and at that, but like there's this the thing where the guy just walks clean through the fucking wall and is like, oh, what? But yeah, they've disabled the protocol inside that building and stuff. And that is the sort of, I guess it's the culmination of the book, right? That like Netherton manages to get himself an invite to Daedra's party, which is a sort of like funeral send-off for Alita, who's still missing, presumed dead. Flynn does accompany in the body of the Peripheral, gets a positive ID on the person that was on the balcony, who, you know, he and Daedra turn out to be in collusion. They sort of abduct Netherton and Flynn and barrel them off to the back rooms and then try to get them out of there and all that kind of shit.
There's the nice detail of Daedra hiring a voice actress to pilot a peripheral that looks like her to give a speech at the funeral for her sister.
Yeah, while she's got Netherton and Flynn at gunpoint, like bringing them to the back rooms or whatever.
Yes,
which is very fun. Because
it's like how inauthentic can you get in terms of your mourning, right?
Yeah. What's quite lovely is that like so Flynn is brought there under the pretense that she's actually one of these neo-primitivist curators that's telepresencing in because she's just too busy otherwise or whatever. They implant like a bullshit module in the Peripheral's brain so that she can kind of like convincingly talk about like the situating art in the yada 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 academic speak. But
it's like a theory module. It allows you to do theory speak. When a sort of verbal trigger comes that activates it, and it just sort of moves your mouth for you without you having any conscious relationship to what you're saying.
But it's funny that the ruse falls apart immediately.
Yeah.
Daedra sees clean through it. So, I mean, they're abducted and they're barreled off and that kind of thing. And in the end turns out that the perpetrator is actually the leader of the Patchers, right? Like Hamed Al Habib, and it's a big kind of scam where he and Daedra and the City Remembrancer are kind of colluding to sell off the garbage patch as real estate. And he had to like stage his own death and to be able to like withdraw to all that kind of stuff.
There's a bunch of layers of obfuscation, but it's all just kind of like a real estate scam, and Al Habib is basically just like kind of like a scam artist. And then the City Remembrancer is in some kind of financial distress. This is like the City of London, like the corporation of the City of London, right? Like this utterly undemocratic, feudal remnant that has become like the core of British capitalism, and in this future is sort of in a parody way, like becomes like the entire British government, more or less. It's like the deep state at the center of everything.
And that's why Lobier is so interested in figuring out this case, because she I think initially suspects that it's the Remembrancer and Daedra that are involved here, and that Alita probably...
Yes, because she's like, she basically works for the City of London, and it's kind of just like cleaning house inside of it. That's her motive.
Yeah, because Al Habib gets vaporized by one of these buggy guns, and what happens to the Remembrancer? Does he get arrested or killed? I don't know.
I believe he's arrested. I think, yeah. Because I think Al Habib gets killed. Daedra just gets, like, put into a big, like, scary amusement park ride and is, like, not very impressed because her dad is a rich, powerful American who, like, got really rich and powerful from the jackpot. And so she's like beyond, like she's untouchable, right? Like she's beyond the law in any place. And then the City Remembrancer, I think Lobier brings him in.
Oh no, hold on! I've got the Wikipedia here, and yeah, both Hamed and Sir Henry are eaten down to the bone by machines. So.
Oh, okay. That's right, because they have like an extra gruesome way to kill the City Remembrancer. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh fuck. Yeah. So I mean that sort of wraps up the case, and then I think the last chapter to kind of follow a couple of years later in Flynn's timeline. And it's all kind of happily ever after, they're doing just fine.
Yeah, it's a very weirdly optimistic dystopian ending. Because it's like, okay, I mean, we have this future London that is essentially like a parody of current London. Like it's like, oh, okay, gentrification is driving everybody out of the city. What if there were no people in the city? The City of London is running the country. What if it were really running the country?
Yeah, right.
Like there are these massive excavations under people's houses in Notting Hill. What if they were like so big that you could drive a massive land yacht into them? This kind of stuff. Gibson just amps it up a bit. But you have that future, which is the result of the jackpot and everybody like you or I dying horrible deaths, with no prospects of it ever really ending. Right? There is no future for this world. Right? It's at the end of history, that would have been the future of the stub, but because people from this dystopian future do like a Posadist operation, like because like the combined like FBI, CIA, NSA analog come and do a Posadist op in the past to like save the world, become this vanguard, like the good ones, the good cops come back with their special magical technology,
Yeah, and like specifically Lobeer having enough information to be able to make these decisions and steer the future. Because like I think like
and technological and sort of political power in her time.
And is it her or is it Wilf that kind of makes the case that like the jackpot happened because, it's like it was an accumulation of small things, and it maybe could have been possible if everyone got their shit together to avert it, but like nobody got their shit together.
I think it's Will. Wilf. It's Wilf who's talking about that. Yeah.
And that in the end, the workers didn't do communism. They didn't respond with a kind of green revolution to the things, whatever, and everything just got shittier and shittier. And so what they're introducing there is like, well, we've got our shit together. We can intervene on your behalf to get your shit together.
Yes. Yeah, like our little conspiracy in the future is so powerful because of the development of the means of production in our time, that like in this very like special circumstances, like, culture way, they can do this intervention and change that. So it's very revolution from above, and not just from above, but from the future,
from beyond. Yeah, the Posadas comparison is perfectly correct. It's the Vanguard from outside of history, like that just magically fucking changes everything.
Yes, so it is a very optimistic, like happy ending, but if you read it within the context of like our situation and what Gibson is extrapolating from, it's like it's very, very pessimistic and dystopian.
Yeah, because with the jackpot and the way it turns out, like the kind of shit we've been going on about for this entire fucking series, of like getting our shit together and doing revolution to make a better world, none of that shit pans out. Like fucking none of it.
Yeah, like in a very short period of time, like everything just gets taken over by warlords and everything is disease and runaway climate catastrophes, mass extinction events, all of that stuff.
And there's in that state of free fall, there's nothing you can't catch the knife once it's falling is kind of what it is.
Yes, yeah. That is the thesis. Yes, that is the thesis for sure.
So yeah, fantastically grim fucking material, really, despite the happy ending, supposedly.
Yeah, it is just such a strange juxtaposition of, happily ever after with that implication that I don't think I've ever really encountered in a book before.
Yeah, like it's singular, right? This is a fucking strange little book, and I don't know, like it really stands out to me as like a really great piece of science fiction and cyberpunk, but also I just think it's an entertaining little read, and I guess because it's not classic cyberpunk, it doesn't get remarked on very much. It's just one of those things that happened in 2014, all those many years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
God almighty, that's almost 10 fucking years ago. While I was reading this, yes, and while we've been recording, I kept thinking like, oh yeah, like 5 years ago in 2014. No, it's
I was thinking like seeing that note at the end that it's like, oh, written by William Gibson, Vancouver, 2014. And I was just thinking back to when I was in Vancouver in 2014 and being like, Yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. I'm just realizing, like, this book, like, it's in a time frame. It's as long as I've known my wife, you know, and I could have sworn this was a lot more recent than that. I did not think that 2014 was that year. I don't know. It's a brain scrambler.
I mean, it's before Trump got elected, right?
Yeah, right. It belongs to a totally different era, right? Like, it just, that fucking, we just passed through the fucking iris of 2016, and everything on the other side of it feels different for some fucking reason. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. I don't know, do we have much else? I think we've covered the interesting parts. There's a lot of just the fun bits, like the thing about, like, the legally purchased cigarette. Like, please tell me the backstory of what the fuck that's about, you know. And every page has one of those things on it.
Yeah, all of the, like, sort of weird, peculiar, like, things from the Department of Homeland Security. They call them homes, and it's very like, what is that? What's that agency in the U.S.? FEMA. Yeah. Like the sort of like FEMA emergency supplies, but it's like become kind of ubiquitous by that point. That's just sort of like almost like in, you know, like how like the Roman emperor would sort of like hand out things to the pearls of Rome. That's kind of like the vibe. Everywhere. Yeah. It's like it's like military surplus, but that's also kind of just like the baseline of material reality that you live with.
Yeah. There's another sort of, well, it's a couple of details from the book that are like, I just love where it's like the characters are confronted with, like, baffling technology. So, like, in the opening couple of scenes, the drones that come down and shred all the patchers, where Netherton just describes it as like there were, you know, these black cylinders that appeared from out of nowhere, and then there was like orange mist, and then everyone was dead, you know, this kind of thing. Very, like, beyond your comprehension. And then there's, like, when Flynn is being rescued from the kidnapping, she's, like, sitting there on, like, her hands are tied with these zip ties, and she just sees, like, what seems, from the description, it seems like they're just, like, squares of light that, like, are projected on the wall, like a blue and a red square of light, like from, like, fucking 3D glasses or something, and they just, like, converge on the table in front of her, and then the light cuts her zip ties somehow. And she's sitting there going, like, what the fuck, you know?
Yes.
And it's like a drone that's made of light or something that's being piloted by one of her friends to, like, get her out of there. And I love those kinds of things where you as a reader have no chance of getting this, but the character also doesn't understand it.
Does the character. Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is this thing, you know? There's some of that towards the end, I guess, in the final scene. Well, the climax sort of scene with the rescue, where, like, there's some weird technology involved.
It's very funny because, like, there's this technology that was used to, like, so they're talking about these, you know, mansions, underground mansions under people's houses, oligarchs' houses in London, right, which are a real thing that exist, and how the excavating machines for building those were just, like, buried underground because they couldn't get them out again, or it was too expensive to do it. So it's sort of like, you know, the workers on the pyramids who are buried with the pyramid, right, with the pharaoh, right, and they had assemblers that went in and, like, took all the material from those excavators and put them reassembled them in parks as sort of, like, fun displays for kids to play with. And this technology is used by Lobier and company to hide the baby buggy guns inside of the chair at this, like, recreated Newgate. where Flynn is being interrogated, and then it just like the chair just sort of disassembles, and there's a massive murder gun for you just hidden in the chair. So it's very like, the oligarchs own technology comes back to bite them in the ass, right? It's very like poetic justice kind of situation.
Absolutely right. And I love that little scene because like the confusion is so palpable of like the chair melts and then like the assemblers, they melt the chair and move the gun into her hand, into her grip at the same time. And she's like pointing.
Yeah, it's like, here you go. All you got to do is press the trigger.
Yeah. And then Habib just fucking vaporizes in front of her. Anyway, I love that kind of palpable confusion whenever it happens. Because, it would be an overwhelming and weird future.
Yeah, and then I guess we said we would just mention something about the television series. We did not... I only watched the first episode. I believe you also watched the first episode?
Yeah, I just watched the first one. It's so fucking weird.
It's so weird. Everything we said about this being sort of like late Gibson, second, third generation cyberpunk, whatever, it does not really apply to the television series of The Peripheral. They just sort of like took the narrative of the book and then like sandwiched in a bunch of like first generation cyberpunk stuff, like literally the plot line of Johnny Mnemonic, like stuff from The Matrix, weird stuff about Flynn being the chosen one and embracing her destiny. It's like so weird. It's just like, I don't have anything against like adaptations being, divergent from the source material, but you have to make it better in some way, and this feels like just strange. I was totally flummoxed by the first episode I watched, and it kind of just turned me off of watching the rest of it because I was like, what are these people doing? Like, this doesn't have anything pertinent to the book to discuss.
I know, right? Like, I mean, I'm not in a rush to watch the rest of it. I think I might, if I have nothing else to do, but I'm not in a big rush to do it. I can sort of understand that they needed to gin it up a little bit to make it a bit more Hollywood because the book is quite slow. Like, I mean, by the time you're getting to, like, as far as I remember, like, it's at the halfway point at which Flynn finally does the peripheral thing and actually goes to the future.
I think it's about the halfway point that, and then a little bit after that, she learns about what the jackpot is, right?
Yeah, that's towards the end of the book where, like, I think she gets the full explanation. The full explanation of the jackpot is, like, quite late. But then...
Yeah, it's like 65% through the book or something,
But, like, they totally front-load it in this thing, because, like, one of the characters just fucking says it to her. Like, oh, by the way, you're going to be fucked pretty soon. Like...
Yeah, like, they take all of the suspense and the mystery and just, like... Just take it out behind the back of the building and shoot it, just... here's the premise, here it is. Whereas, like, that's kind of one of the big draws to continue to read the book is figuring out what the hell is going on when everything seems so sinister around you, right? It's very sort of like, like in a thriller or a suspense novel. And I think that, like, they could have just gone that direction because the chapters are so short. And you could just cut out a bunch of stuff that is, novel stuff that wouldn't go into a screenplay and it would work just fine. It doesn't need to be this, like, weird ass Johnny Mnemonic 90s cyberpunk story.
Yeah, there's way too much of that. It's
very strange.
There's far too much of that, and there's far too much of the, the sort of, like, character power sort of stuff of, like, when she's in the peripheral, she's a badass and that kind of shit. I don't know. I agree. I think you could have just done an adaptation, like, pretty straight, like, and kept that kind of mystery, the whodunit sort of stuff, without I don't know. Yeah, it's also Alita West is very alive for a lot of it. It's fucking weird, right? In that first episode,
it like
she's like a main character rather than somebody who gets murked. You know?
Yeah, it's so strange. It's a very, very weird adaptation. Feels like some things they did were like maybe good ideas in principle. Other things are like sorely misguided. Maybe they didn't trust their audience. Maybe they didn't trust their own ability to make a like suspenseful show. It's really, really strange.
Yeah, I think the trust the audience thing is the thing that stands out to me. That like this is one of those things that doesn't trust the audience. Like it's not doing the, I don't know, the fucking the thing we like, you know, where it has some confidence in its viewers. You know, it's not doing that.
It ends up feeling very much like a sort of combination between that like 90s cyberpunk and like a sort of like Tom Clancy cyber espionage thriller, like sort of like that. What is it? The Tom Clancy adaptation that I think it was Amazon did. Jack Ryan, the Jack Ryan show. Yeah. It's kind of got that vibe to it.
Yeah, because like the Peripheral that she ends up in is this chisel. It's a version of Burton, right? Like it's this chiseled guy dude sort of fucking thing who does backflips and stuff. It's very funny.
Yes. Yeah, which is kind of like a seed that you get, but it's not with Burton in the book. It's with Connor, right? So it's just so weird. Yeah. It's like you ran the Peripheral through like a sort of like AI chatbot thing, and it came up with an alternative version of it.
Like mixed with like an article summarizer, you know, it just condenses everything.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how the next episode goes, but I'm not in a huge rush. Not in a huge rush for it. Also, like, I mean, London is way more populated than it should be. Because, like, one of the big things that Flynn notices is that, like, almost none of the lights are on. And there are no cars on the road. But, like, the flyover shots, there's loads of lights on, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, did you read the book? Anyway. Yeah, so I mean, I think overall, I guess what we could take away from this is that, like, it is an interesting post-capitalist future, a dystopia, you know, one that kind of says some interesting things about our relationship to the past, our relationship to historical simulation, and just that sort of interesting idea of, like, the shit we're going through right now is not the X crisis, the Y crisis, but it's just the jackpot. Like, it's like, I like that idea because it is like, to say that we are in the climate crisis is such a like narrow description of the nature of the crisis we're in. Like, it is a major element of that crisis, but there are so many other dimensions as well, that just giving it a sort of catch-all name seems to like validate the complexity of it without erasing the horror of it, you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, also, like, have you noticed on Twitter, like, people are using the term omnicrisis or polycrisis at the moment? And I think they should replace it with jackpot.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there you go. That's basically what the jackpot gets at, yeah.
Ooh, hold the fuck on. I just noticed. I've been, in the background here, I've been just scrolling through William Gibson's Wikipedia page, and it's got the selected works at the end, and it's got, you know, the Bridge trilogy and all that kind of shit, and then it's got Jackpot trilogy, right? The Peripheral.
Oh, we didn't even know it was in a trilogy.
No, we're too stupid for this shit. But
oh my god.
The Peripheral in 2014, Agency 2020, and then Jackpot to be decided.
Oh, I see. So he's still writing the Jackpot book. I see.
Fuck me, that's good. Oh, I'm gonna read Agency next. That's cool.
That's the standard of research you can expect from General Intellect Unit, I guess. But
Yeah.
Hopefully we have shed some light on this unusual corner of science fiction and William Gibson's late career work.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it has many positive lessons for us, which is usually what we're all about, but
yeah, I mean, it's very Gibson, like, it's very lib, like, you know, the good cops will save us, kind of shit.
Oh, and like the inflection point for avoiding the jackpot is preventing the assassination of the president or something, you know.
Yeah. I laughed out loud when I saw that. I was like, I kind of understand the idea of, like, in the sort of the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand and that kind of stuff, but it is also just makes me think of bad dudes, like, you know, just, are you a bad enough dude to save the president? I thought that was the direction that the story was going to take. Like, just, you know, Flynn and company get, like, weaponized by Lowbeer as, like, the badass special ops team to save the president. And who knows? Maybe that is what happens in Agency, but it's not what happens in the Peripheral.
No. Oh, shit. Anyway. Good fun. Thanks for coming along with us, listeners. It's been a lot of fun. Maybe you've read the book, maybe you've enjoyed it vicariously. It's all fine. I don't know, we should probably figure out what we're going to do next, but while you wait for that, you can catch us on Twitter, if it still exists, at GI Unit Pod. We're on all the podcast apps, so subscribe and do all that kind of stuff. Download some of the previous episodes. They're approximately as good as this one. I wonder if we could interfere with them from the future and, you know, go back and talk ourselves into...
You know what? We can use the magic of editing. we actually can interfere for the future in this episode.
Oh, it'd be real fun to feed an episode into one of these AI grinders and see what the fuck comes out.
The General Intellect Unit auto-generated podcast. Oh god. Just see your doppelganger on the screen. That's a weird. Yeah, exactly. That's a weird concept. Yeah.
I would not like that. It would be no good. If you want to support the show and, you know, help us buy books and get access to our community Discord, you can go to patreon.com/General Intellect Unit. Throw us a couple of bucks a month. It'll help keep the lights on as we start into the jackpot.
Well, you know, the future is already here. It's just differently distributed. Unevenly distributed, that, you know, I feel like that especially applies to the UK when it comes to the jackpot.
Yeah,
so,
we're way ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the situation you're in.
Yeah, unfortunate. Yeah. We'll be getting a preview of everything to come for everyone else. We're also part of a network of podcasts. So if you go to emancipation.network, check out our sister shows, Swampside Chats, From Alpha to Omega, Jumpsuit Utopia, and Mortal Science. They're all fantastic. I don't know. Do we got anything else? Is that the entire readout that I never write down? Well,
I would just say, enjoy your end of year celebrations, and yes, we'll be back in 2023.
Oh dear, yeah. The future is so much. It's so much and so fast.
Yes, it's a red and green square of light that converge and do something magical.
Ooh, oh dear. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.